And we're live. Will, we're live. We're actually live. We weren't live last week. We were live, but not in the real world. But welcome everybody. It's the Mindstate Marketing Hour with Will Leach. He's the author of Marketing to Mind States. And I'm Steve Brown, your co-host. And today we have a special guest. It's an interview with Melina Palmer. She's the founder, CEO of the Brainy business. Welcome, team.
Hello, Steve. So I think you got to kind of at least start off like, it sounded like you were on drugs just now. When you're like, we were live, but not in the real world. Like we should probably talk a little bit about to our audience about what that really meant. That kind of scared me.
Like last week, Will and I were here. We were having technical difficulty. It was one of those days where you were all prepared, but then you got thrown a curveball. So we got thrown a curveball. That's why we weren't. People would listen to this. They attended. We had promoted it just like everything. And all of a sudden, it was dark. So, but here we are. We don't quit.
Happens to the best of us. Every small business knows what it's like to have everything planned and then one thing goes wrong. But we're in a good place today, Steve. Good to see you.
Yeah, so happy to be here. So today we're getting to talk with Melina. And Melina, tell us a little bit about Brainy.
Yeah, just being brainy in general. Yeah. So I'm Melina Palmer. I'm an applied behavioral economist, and my company and podcast are called The Brainy Business, which is, where that braininess, I guess, comes from. And I do have a book as well called What Your Customer Wants and Can't Tell You. I don't know. It's like my face.
Whoop, whoop.
Book. And I help people to understand the psychology of why people buy and how to apply behavioral economics into their business.
Now, I think Melina's being a little bit very humble here. I am a huge, hey, Livio, good to see you from Italy. I am very, very surprised that she didn't go into all the amazing things that Melina does. So actually, Melina, Steve was asking me a little bit ago, he's like, tell me a little bit more about Melina. And I was telling him how you kind of, to me anyways, made a really big impact on the behavioral economics world that I'm a part of about 3 years ago is when you're just coming up everywhere, right? And just for you guys who don't know, like the Brainy business, this podcast is an amazing podcast. And it's in 170 countries now. And it's like, I think, and you even say this, like, I think it's reached over 500,000 downloads, right?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, we're right on the tails with the Mindstate Marketing Hour. We're close, but that's amazing stuff, guys. Melina also writes for Inc. You're also, you're writing for different organizations, and you and I now we actually work together at Texas A&M's Human Behavior Lab. We are teaching an applied behavioral economics certification program. So we have people from all over the world, honestly, in our program. I teach behavioral marketing. Melina, you teach all sorts of things. You behavioral economics 101. Yeah. But hey guys, for you guys who don't know, like Melina is a rising star. She's already kind of taken our industry, honestly, to into a totally different stratosphere. Melina, everybody loves you. Everybody knows you. Everybody wants to be with you and be like you. So welcome to the Mindstate Marketing Hour. We are excited to have you on the show.
Well, see, this is why you need other people to introduce you, right?
That's right.
You never know what to say on those things, but thank you for all the very, very kind words. Awesome. Will, I appreciate it very much.
Great. It's honestly our pleasure. So here's what we want to do, guys. You guys know how the show works. What I want to do is just spend a little bit of time getting to know you, Melina, your journey as a small business owner. I love you because you're in the behavioral sciences space, but not everybody's in the behavioral science space. But I think there's an element of that I'd love to get into a little bit as well. And ultimately, I always like to frame up our session like this, that we are in a very competitive industry. Even you and I, who are very specialized in the behavioral science space, it's still incredibly competitive. And we're competing against companies that are much bigger than us with many, many more resources. So we're talking many, many times to the smaller businesses. Sometimes it's a solopreneur, sometimes it's a small shop. And how do we compete against the massive companies that are out there? How do we find a way to compete in this very oversaturated world? So ultimately, we're going to get there and learn some tips and tricks from you. Like, how are you doing it? Because you are rising above many of the largest companies out there that are promoting your name is out there every bit as high as they are. So just off the bat, like, tell us a little bit about your story. Like, where did you grow up? Why in the world are you in behavioral sciences now? Like, what was that journey?
Yeah. So for me, I feel like my journey always starts a little bit further back to be that I'm actually from the state of Alaska, which is something that a lot of people don't know because I guess I don't talk about enough. But my family on my mom's side all really lives on the reservation. I was born on a native hospital in Anchorage, actually.
Wow.
So I am Alaskan native. I don't talk about that all too much, but the braids maybe give it away. But so when we go way back to who I am, that's me. But I grew up in the state of Washington primarily, and I ended up going to the University of Washington. But before that, I knew forever I was going to be a singer. That was what my job was going to be. I was going to be on this, stages everywhere. I competed singing opera in high school and lots of other things. And my senior year, I was, filling out my applications for Juilliard and things like that, and kind of realized that everyone that I knew that got a degree in music ended up teaching high school or junior high school choir, things like that, which is valuable. I loved my own teachers, and I knew that wasn't really what I wanted to do, and figured I could always find a stage, to be able to be on, even if my degree wasn't in that. So I ended up getting my degree in marketing and business administration from the University of Washington. And there was this one class at one point, there was like one book, little thing about buying psychology and why people do the things they do and buy the things they buy. And I thought, oh, this is amazing. I want to go get a master's in this. I wasn't even thinking about further education at that point, and I was just enthralled. And I spent the better part of 10 years calling universities that said, that's not a thing. There's not a program for that. We don't have that. Yeah, you can make your own program if you want. And I said, just put a pin in this. I don't need to pay you a whole bunch of money if I know what I need to learn already. So we'll hang out.
That's right.
And so I was part of an innovation fellowship, I guess. So while I was running a marketing department for a financial institution, and this 2-year program. And at one point they brought in some people from the Center for Advanced Hindsight at Duke University who were presenting and talking about the work that they were doing. And that's their behavioral economics team under Dan Ariely. And I knew this is it. This is what I've been looking for all this time. And so I cornered them and forced them to talk to me for far longer than I think they wanted to. And they found out, they said it's called behavioral economics. I found myself a master's program and jumped right in. And would say then the next real aha moment, or whatever we like to call it, was I realized that the things that were so clear and obvious to me, I knew I was early-ish because I had spent such a long time finding a program and school saying it didn't exist.
That's right.
And especially on the applied side. And so I didn't realize, though, how few people were talking about how you can apply behavioral economics to communication, marketing, change management, and just anything else in business. Nobody was really talking about yet. And so had that why not me moment, and ended up launching the podcast, which to my knowledge is the first in the world about behavioral economics in business, which is why, I had my very blue ocean that then started the path there. And, anybody who searched for behavioral economics for a long time, I was the number one or sometimes only thing that came up. And so being able to just share about what behavioral economics is and why it matters. It really was, you've had a podcast and things before. It was kind of creating my own warm leads was the idea, right? Because trying to tell people behavioral economics is a thing. This is why it's important. This is why the way you're doing things is wrong. And you should hire me to help fix that thing is a real tough sell.
Mm-hmm.
That's a hard setup. And so the podcast was just to get people interested and know what it even was. And then, took off from there.
Well, hey, Melina, we got a question really quickly from Livia. Before I do, not everybody, this is very much a behavioral science based kind of podcast and show, but just in case, quickly, what is behavioral economics? If there's a small business owner out there saying, what is she talking about? What is it?
Yeah, it is the psychology of why people buy. really. So why people do the things they do, buy the things they buy. Traditional economics assumes logical people making rational choices in everything that they do, and that's not the world that we live in. And so often those models don't predict what people will actually do. And so combining with psychology and neuroscience and some other fields helps to more accurately predict behavior. And in the greater behavioral sciences, I help people to communicate with the rules of how the brain really makes decisions so that things are naturally easier.
Nice. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hey, Steve, do you want to join? You want to jump in here with
No.
maybe it's even Livio?
Yeah, so Livio, this is a great question. I was thinking the exact same thing. It's like, the Will's the scientist here, and he's applying it in an educational setting, but where the rubber meets the road is what I love to talk about. So I'd love to hear your answer to Livio's question.
Yeah. So when I think about, and the phrasing on this is one that I will touch on. So how do I think entrepreneurs should be persuaded to use behavioral science? I'm not sure if that's encouraging them, it's important to them and getting them to buy in, or if you are going to be, nudging others to use it or whatnot. But what I like to let people know is that while behavioral science, behavioral economics is a newer field, it is definitely one that is here to stay. It's based on decades of research and it is one on the rise. So Bloomberg named behavioral scientist as the #1 job of this decade back in 2019. And that was even above data analyst. So behavioral science is a thing. All the big companies are looking for either internal abilities for behavioral science or they're hiring consultants like Will and myself to be able to help them with incorporating behavioral science into their business. And so if you are not, you're going to be left behind. That's just the what needs to happen. And where there are such large budgets, as Will had said, of companies that are hiring for this, you need to be able to do something on your own. And there is a lot that you can do. That's why I wrote my book. That's why What Your Customer Wants and Can't Tell You exists, is being able to start using some of this without having to go get your own PhD or whatnot in the behavioral sciences. Because not everyone wants that. You love your job, you love what you do, and you want to be able to just turn the dial a little bit, be a little bit better. My favorite thing about behavioral economics is it just shows how one small shift can make a huge difference and it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. There are so many examples of this. And so that little tiny thing, if you are thoughtful enough about it, if you understand the behavior and the problem and what you're trying to do, and you test a little something, you can have a really huge impact.
Yeah, let me add on to that. Livia, what I do, if it was the other side of the coin, which is like you're trying to convince one of your clients on how they should be using behavioral science. I use this fact all the time. 2 facts. And I always say that research tells you that you make about 35,000 decisions in every single day. And the vast majority of those must be made at the non-conscious level because you wouldn't be able to get out of bed if you had to do cost-benefit analyses of every one of these 35,000 decisions. So when I tell that to my clients, they go, huh? And I go, so they must be at the subconscious level, right? That makes sense. And then the second stat I use, as I said, an old study, but from Redbird Marketing said that on the average, your customers are seeing between 6,000 and 10,000 advertisements every day. And that's old. So my guess is it's closer to 10 grand or 10,000 advertisements. And I just heard this one, Melina, you may know about this, but somebody just told me that there's a study now that says on the average day, an American scrolls the length of the Statue of Liberty. I don't know if that's true, but I love it.
I didn't see it, but I love, this is a nice framing of something to where you get, what that is. But
and so what I do is I use little facts like that. And then I just get my client to go, oh, like this is a big deal. Like everybody feels these things. So therefore, if all these things are happening at the non-conscious level, I should at least understand how the non-conscious influences my marketing, my management, my organizational behavior, all those things. And so those are the ways I get my clients. That was where you were, Melina. A decade ago, I was literally having conversations with people saying, this is system 1 versus system 2. We're not there anymore, thank gosh, but there's still a lot of work. There's still a lot of work.
We are there. We are there still with a
I hate it. It's been a decade.
There's still a lot of that. And that's okay. That's, I love helping people to have that like, what? moment,
Yeah.
right? Where you get to share that information. So when I'm doing corporate trainings or when I'm speaking, doing keynotes or whatever, I always help people to experience whatever the concept is and then explain what it is. And so, an example here
Yeah.
being one of, I always like to ask, are there more or less than 100,000 penguins in Antarctica?
Okay.
So, give me
More.
the more.
It's got to be
So,
more.
okay, more. And do you have a number? So, more than 100,000, what do we think?
Closer to like, I don't know, 10 million.
Ooh.
Really?
What were you going to say, Steve?
I was going to go. There's 999,000.
The price is right. He wants to win the big prize.
Without going over, right? I bid one penguin.
That's one penguin.
So typically, if I ask this and then, you get people saying it's 50,000 or whatever. And so it is about 12 million. And this is an anchoring concept.
Cool.
And, but if I wanted you to be really high, maybe I would have asked, are there more or less than 1 billion penguins in Antarctica? And would your number have been different?
Oh my gosh, like closer to 800 million or something. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so I then have one with polar bears. But the way you ask that, then people, you have to though name it and claim it. If I would have let you just leave it in your brain, you would have said, I bet I would have been close. I was probably around there. Nobody needs to know. You don't really believe it in the same way as if you say it and you see the rest of the group doing that too. It makes a really big difference. So that's a way that I help people to have the moment where you were tricked. You get to see how your brain does those things. And then it helps to understand that everyone else does that too.
I love how you're talking about the brain. That's the way I think when people realize how their brain works and how it's their responsibility to honor the way the brain is desiring to have information presented to it, then they feel safer and they feel connected to you. And I love how you're saying that. Livio has another question here, actually.
Nice.
So in Italy, industries make little use of behavioral sciences. What's the situation in the United States?
Ooh, that's a great question. I'll let you start off with that, Melina. I think I may have a different opinion. I don't know. Go ahead.
I would say that the US and the UK and Australia are probably leading places where you have a lot of research and things that are happening. And there's more than you probably realize going on in Italy right now. Like I know that I was brought in so virtually doing for like a book club of, several hundred people in Greece that were interested in behavioral economics and how to be implementing it. And I've talked with groups from all over the world. And there are a lot of people who are helping others to start using this. So while it might not be as obvious, I would say to be looking around at things like the Global Association of Applied Behavioral Sciences and things like that to see what you can find. But yes, there is a lot happening in business in the US in behavioral science, but you don't hear about it as much because corporate people like to keep things under wraps. So that's what I would say.
I'd say the same thing. The thing I would tell you, Livio, is that I would say the way it's trickled down in my world is the largest companies in America, the UK, the really, really big companies you know about, they have behavioral scientists in their staff. They may not call themselves that, but they have either a group that is dedicated to behavioral sciences, and whether that's with organizational behavior or with marketing, external or internal, they either have a group that's dedicated or they have a group of people that are at least exploring it. Now that's starting to trickle down now, I think, in the United States to more of your mid-tier companies. It's hard for me to describe what a mid-tier company could be. Like a company that's $100 million in sales or below, right? So those are still massive companies, but now it's starting to trickle down to there. And what this show is all about is trying to trickle it down to sometimes the solopreneur, sometimes the small business who, like Melina said, can take you don't have to be a PhD in neuroeconomics. All you have to do is just know that these principles are out there. If we understand the way people make decisions, tweak messaging, tweak the way we frame things up, and we can better our employees' experiences, and we can also better our marketing. So I think, just like Melina said, and the last thing I would say would be there are certain industries where I think there's more investment. In the financial services industry, in the healthcare industry, there's a lot more investment. In the government sector, there's a lot more investment. Other industries, not as much investment. So I think you have to figure out where the investments are, and you'll see lots of activity. Other areas, restaurants, which is surprising, but we have a lot of restaurants in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. They kind of know menu design, but that's about it. They kind of get menu design with behavioral economics, but there's not a lot past that. So other industries have much greater expertise in it.
Perfect. So,
Yeah.
Melina, when did you start like connecting the brain to your research? For me, I always say the brain's like our bodyguard. Okay, that's always looking if we're safe, and if we're not safe, it's going to make you feel uncomfortable and get out of that situation. Be it a website, a book, um, a coffee shop, or whatever. When did that start to really like be like a big lever that you could use to connect with people?
I think it's something that there are some people who have always sort of always thought there's a little bit more, even if you didn't define it in that way, I guess. So I remember when I was at the financial institution, we were going to be running an auto loan campaign. You want to do something with auto loans, and everybody wants to do the like, where our rates lower than their rate, right? Sort of a thing. And we had a campaign that we would do every year where you can, if you transfer your auto loan to us, we'll beat your rate by 1%. And then you can just sort of talk through that. And I came up with this idea that we should do. So it was going to be around the holidays. And so I was thinking about this, way we could associate with what people are thinking and make it this kind of crazy deal of having a car in the mall. Like, so there were going to be two different mall displays we were going to do, and that we actually cut a car in half and had a whole thing, and you could take your picture in this half a car, and it had, the step and repeat behind it, and these videos showing about cutting the car, and the whole thing being, and then we had videos asking people, would you rather cut your payment or cut your car? Right. What's the, as like a silly sort of play on words, but the brain is really literal like that. And so is it easier? Would you rather, so the video's like, would you rather cut your payment? And everyone's like, payment, payment, payment. And then the last guy says car, right? And then you show that like the whole video of the artist cutting it in half, and then you can take a picture with it, And so that is very much about taking those steps back and thinking like, what might be a connection that's going on in here that could make this into something funny or memorable, that when I'm thinking about later, maybe I do want to cut my rate or whatever, you could think about it in that different way. So while I wasn't necessarily like, brain science says, I'd say it's always been a part of kind of what I do.
I love that example. What I love about that. I want to talk a little bit more about it, is that you said, take a step back. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what behavioral science is. Sometimes people think of behavioral sciences, behavioral economics as a way of advancing, marketing, organizational behavior. And so they almost think of it almost as let's add it on to get a little bit better, which I make that case too. But I like how you said, but actually really the hard work is stepping back, using a principle from behavioral economics, behavioral science, whatever, however you want to define these things, understanding how people make decisions, and then going forward saying, oh, if people do make, like in your case, I want to create an association, something that is surprising, that'll be memorable. So how can I do that? Certainly you could have said, cut your rate by 50% or cut your rate in half, and you could test that. Okay, that's fine, right? We could use some behavioral science principles to know, should we do 50% or half or whatever? But like you said, is like, let's take a step back. And what the real problem is to be memorable, engaging, create something that's breakthrough, funny, and in fact, engaging, so that when the time is right to get to, transfer your auto loan, then, oh yeah, I remember this company in the mall. And that step back is an important principle for all of us to remember, is that oftentimes we think of these things as being an additive, and they can be seen as an additive, but the smarter people think of it beforehand, before they do the creative. They think about the strategy of what they're trying to do. And like you did, you had one idea, but you could have come up with 30 ideas, 50 ideas, as opposed to coming up with one idea and then let's add behavioral economics to it. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and I go with that, on the 35,000 decisions too, and how much people are thinking about at any given time, and just really Understanding the problem is where everyone goes wrong. That first step,
Yeah.
that most critical piece, it's it's really easy to find the right answer to the wrong question and work on solving the
I
wrong
love that.
problem. And so where you say, well, no one's buying this because it's too expensive. So let's work on streamlining what we do and cutting
Take costs out of
expenses.
it.
And and then you spend, hundreds and hundreds of hours on, making things more efficient so you can cut your price by, 2% or whatever it is, because you think that's how we're going to compete. And it doesn't make the difference because you were working on the wrong thing. And so taking more time to be thoughtful about the problem, understanding what's happening, and saying, well, what if it wasn't price? Right. So that's what we thought of at first. And what if it was something else? What if we were to look at it from this angle? Or people buy expensive stuff they don't need all the time. So it can't just be that, pricing's often not about price. And so if you take some time to think about it and evaluate, you can find the right problem. And then you think about the behavioral intervention that ties in and where you're wanting someone to go, where they are, and how you nudge them to keep them on the path. I like to talk about it like bumpers in bowling, right? So we need to know where we want to go, where they are, how we're needing to get them there. And then if we can keep them going down the line, that's the right way to make it happen. But we only want to test very small things. And if you do the right things, you can do a lot less of them.
Yeah. Good point.
Melina, you were talking about that cutting the car in half, and it made me think of Robert Cialdini's book Persuasion. That's when I kind of got hooked into a flavor of this. What's the difference in he's talking about persuasion and how we're naturally inclined to react to certain triggers. How does that play in behavioral science?
So Cialdini is just the greatest anyway. And I had the great honor of interviewing him on my own show. And
Mhm.
he's just a really amazing guy. And a lot of the concepts that we talk about in the behavioral sciences are based on his work and research. So, liking and scarcity, reciprocity, these concepts in the behavioral sciences are ones that he talks about in influence. And just understanding those drives. So he has brought some really great terms to some of those and done some really important testing. Also in social proof, I would say that's a space where he's done a lot of work. And so, understanding that when you go to stay at the hotel and they say, hey, we're trying to do good things for the environment, so use your towel again. You go, like maybe not. But if it's say, 75% of people like you or who have stayed in this room reuse their towel, and you think that's a weird thing to say logically.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it very much increases the likelihood that people reuse towels and don't even have to consciously recognize they're doing it. So, Cialdini has done tons of amazing research that very much ties in with the greater behavioral sciences and the psychology side of what we do.
Hey, Melina, let me ask you, because I want to pivot a bit into being a small business. And you're competing against lots of businesses now, and you're trying to figure out this and navigate this. What business do you think? What business are you in?
I'm in the people business. That's
Yeah.
the so no, I am really in the business of helping companies to up level the work that they're already doing. So I kind of like to say that I am a chameleon, and I keep my business small intentionally in that so many, if you do go to a large firm, you often have where people say you have to use our systems and our people, and this is how it works, and you have to use our designers and our this and our that, and you have to adapt to us. Based on my understanding of the brain and how change works and getting things to move along, that's not the best thing for having a company really continue to do what they're doing. Ideally, these companies have marketing teams, they have design firms they use, they have market research teams that they're going to and things that they're doing. And having someone that can come in that can say, if we move this a little bit, if you change the way you're saying that a little bit, if you can incorporate behavioral sciences here or there, I don't know what I would call that as the type of business. The help make your campaign more effective business.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Support your team
Yeah.
business.
Well, then, so like you said, you intentionally keep it small, and maybe even said being an outsider allows you to impact change on a larger organization, because sometimes you're seen as the authority, as opposed if you're internally inside of a larger organization, you're like, well, you're just Will Leach, the guy who gets nuggets for lunch that I see in the cafeteria. Like, no, I'm the specialist here, and maybe you can get people to react. So I'm with you on that. I've had my fair share of being brought in as the authority to get somebody to take change. So you're a small business. And you are trying to reach more customers, make a bigger impact in the industry. What is your general approach to getting your message out? I mean, you talked about the podcast, and that could be very well all it is, but what is your general approach to getting your message out so people become aware of you?
So yes, the podcast is the biggest piece of what I do to raise awareness. And then the next piece I would say is really being present and being outwardly helpful first. So just it ties in with my personality for one, but if we're going to relate it back to these behavioral concepts like we're talking about, there is that reciprocity piece of being there to support other people first and know that business is a long game and eventually things will come back to be of value in whatever way. I would say that the work at Texas A&M is a perfect example of this. So very early on in the podcast, especially, I did shout outs on the show for 5-star reviews, social proof, and encouraging more people to do them. Right. And so would say, hey, at Will Leach, thanks for the nice things you said in your 5-star review. And if you leave a review of the Brainy Business Podcast, potentially I'll talk to you. And so one of them, this was like episode 15 or something. So really, really early. I said, hey, at Pool Jeff, like, I don't know who you are. Usually everybody else I was able to go find, like, this is their Instagram. They were already following me on social media somewhere. And I couldn't find this person. Will knows why I couldn't find this person. And so I said, like, hey, at Pool Jeff, I don't know who you are, but thanks for this 5-star review. And if you let me know, I'll give you a proper shout out later. And then a few weeks later, I get this email of like, hey, I'm Jeff Poole. I'm, a program manager here at the Human Behavior Lab at Texas A&M University. We love your show. We all listen to it. We're making all of our doctoral students listen when they come into the lab. It's like required reading for them now to get up to speed on behavioral economics. And so that little shout out came back, and I could have just left that, right, and said, oh, thanks so much. Thanks for letting me know. But instead, taking that next step to say, wow, that's amazing. I would love to learn more about what you're doing at the lab, which is true, and to hear, just more about that. And then we have a conversation. They invite me to come down to the lab and have a tour. And then I did an interview with Marco Palma, the head of the lab, when I was down doing that tour and showing off the eye tracking and all the cool stuff that we do at the lab. And then eventually that turned into teaching with the lab and introducing to, I would forget, Will, we knew each other.
Just
and then I
found,
and then found out that you had this tie-in with A&M too. So
it was like 6 months before or something. It was right around that same time, but it wasn't through the lab. I knew you outside of the lab, and then I heard about you at the lab because they said, oh, we're talking to this person, Melina Palmer. I go, I know Melina Palmer. And then that was the first time I think we probably would have interacted a lot anyways.
Right. Yep. And so just sharing first on LinkedIn and things like that, people's work out into the world. So years ago, I heard a stat that I think might be a made up one, but the principle holds. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know where I heard it. I've never seen it again. And things have changed so much since then. At that point, they said, like, for every 100 people that see your post, 10 people will like it and 1 person will comment. It's reasonable enough, right? So, be the 1 person who comments and you're going to stand out, right? Mm-hmm. I think then now we can take this a step further back, as is my way. And we say, for every 1,000 people that see the thing, 100 will like it, 10 will comment, 1 maybe will share. And go share your work just kindly out into the world. So I don't know that I've ever encountered anyone ever that if you share their work and say, oh man, Will did this amazing thing. Look how cool Will is. He wrote this article and I love it. And I tag you on LinkedIn, that you're going to go, ugh, I can't believe you tagged me in a post, Melina,
Yeah.
and shared my work. Right.
Yeah. How dare you try to make me. Yeah.
And so just finding things, and we all do it all the time, where you see something and go, oh, that's so smart. What an interesting thing. And even people you've never met before, if you love Cialdini's work, where we're talking about, go share about what they do. And like I talk about my favorite books, and go tag the person on Twitter. You never know, they might find you. And even just for other people to go follow them, just give very generously and be a human person showing up. I know you talked with Priscilla McKinney recently. I had her on the show as well, where remember, you're a human in a world of humans, and just share generously. And I think it comes back for you in a positive way.
Yeah, it's an important concept you just said, because that's where I wanted to get to. I think is that, and I didn't realize it honestly until I'm in this world that Steve brought me into, which is kind of the digital space, things like this, where I didn't realize how important it really is to give a recommendation. How really it helps when people share your content. Like I used to be the guy who would read your stuff, the whole stuff, and go, "That's so awesome," and never like it because I didn't realize it helped so much. You're just like, "Oh, that's cool." Now, like when you get somebody who likes it, or I have people send me letters. I'm sure you get emails or letters too. And you're like, "Oh my gosh, you're really making an impact on the world." But so many people don't know because other people don't let them know. So now I'm much more conscious about, like what you just said, is that personal touch. If not, and I don't think what you said is not about getting business. It's sometimes just like, it's actually really cool. Like you're inspired by them. So why wouldn't you let other people know so you can be inspired? And of course, there could be a good outcome, whether it's karma or it actually is business or whatever. But it's important that human touch, that you just took that extra next step. You're reading the content anyways. So it's just the extra step of just sharing it, tagging that person. Then you never know what can come up. And for you, it became, I get to now teach at the world's largest neuro laboratory. So that's something really cool just by taking a little step farther than what you could have. So that's a great way of growing your brand, growing your business in a way that's human, right? Because you care about those people who are writing. You want to see them succeed as much as you want to succeed. That's the way I look at it anyways.
Yeah. Well, and just knowing that being a herding species, the reason that so few people do this is because it's a little bit scary to stand out, even if you support the thing. To be the one that goes into, and you worry, like, what if they judge me? What if people think I'm weird for sharing this? What if they're upset? We get all this, we talk about counterfactual thinking, right? The what ifs going on in there, right? Of maybe I shouldn't. And just in case, we talk ourselves out of it. And because you don't see it as much, it feels like you don't need to do that thing, or that it might be weird. And so being the one that does something is actually then very valuable as the person who creates content, because we, as a content creator, put a lot of time and effort into the things that we make. Yeah. And while, like, sure, Will and I wrote our books for our own enjoyment, it's also for somebody else to get value out of. Right? Yeah. I think Dan Ariely says in one of his books, like, this, I'm not writing this to go just sit on my own shelf. Like I want some, if no one was ever going to read it, would I put in the effort to write it? And probably not. So people telling you that they got value out of it, that they enjoyed it is such a huge, like, it's a delightful email to receive, or Twitter comment, or whatever it is. And so being that person helps you to stand out in a way that is very positive, and that reciprocity, that liking, that all comes together. So don't let your own fear of standing out in that way, that herding instinct, keep you from doing the thing. That's really helpful. And I think it's all about putting the social back in social media and being able to share other people's things. The other thing I will say, coming up with your own content takes a lot of time and effort. Like I just said, going and seeing something that Will wrote and saying, you know what, that's smart. I'm going to go share it and say, look how smart my friend Will is. It made me think of this little tidbit. Yeah. I get to add just a tiny bit. Yeah. And I'm helping you, and it spreads the word. I mean, so there's a lot of good in being that way in the world.
Melina, it's been awesome to have you as a guest today. Melina Palmer of the Brainy business. Say that right. The Brainy business. You have to be brainy this now. So tell us the title of your book, and then I want folks to go and get connected to your podcast as well.
Yeah, thank you. So my book is, and I went and grabbed it when we were talking, so I might as well. So is What
Great
Your
title.
Customer Wants and Can't Tell You, and it's available in all the places, so you can get that wherever. You can find it and the podcast on my website, thebrainybusiness.com. That has the Brainy Business podcast. It has my book. The second book in the series is scheduled to come out in the fall. It's What Your Employees Need and Can't Tell You. Yay.
Mm.
So that's all about change management and understanding teams and helping people to be better with change within companies, being better manager, things like that. And then that will be at thebrainybusiness.com as well. And you can find me as the Brainy Biz on all the socials.
So this is part usually not on the guest show, but usually Will and I will transition and we'll throw him a couple of curveball questions from the audience. And so what I'm going to do today is we have one question that I'm going to throw both of you.
Oh, wow.
And so Olivia asked, what do you think of focus groups?
You want to go first, Will? Or you? Oh, I'm first.
You're our guest.
I'll go since I made you go first last time.
Okay.
I believe that there's a time and a place for focus groups, Livio, but generally I do not tend to do research in focus groups, specifically when I'm trying to understand behavioral change, because I want to place people in context of wherever they are when they make a decision. So for instance, if I'm going to go do work on cereal, and I want to understand some non-conscious factors that are influencing people for breakfast, I don't want to place them into a sterile focus group room if I can help it. I want to do that piece of research in their home because I understand that there's non-conscious factors happening in that breakfast area where the kids are and where the dishes are that are influencing decisions. So I will do focus groups because sometimes you just got to you have to do it, honestly. But I try to avoid it. I try to go to context. Be in the context of a decision. I get better insights.
Yeah.
All right. You're up, Melina.
Yep. I would agree. I think observational research is where it's at with a lot of this. So being able to see what people really do instead of asking them what they think they're going to do or what they intend to do. That being said, focus groups do have a valuable spot in when you can ask questions, if you have someone who is well trained in the types of questions that they're able to ask and that you can be working on uncovering some sort of behaviors. And I think work with metaphor elicitation is really valuable and getting at this other area that you couldn't just get in a regular survey when you can take advantage of that opportunity, seeing how people interact and picking up on little things that they say that might mean something else and that you can kind of go, I wonder what that means over here, that can then get into this bigger pursuit of questioning, which is my favorite space. So I think there's value in hearing from real people. The way that they would talk about it is useful, and it cannot be the only thing that you do.
I love that's how the title it kind of alludes to that.
Yes.
What they can't tell you is
Yes.
the most important thing.
Absolutely.
Great. So we got a little Feeding the Ducks music here.
Ooh.
We're going to transition. Melina, you've been a great guest. Will, you want to say a little?
Yeah. Hey, Melina, thank you so much. It's exactly where I wanted to go. I want to talk about how you as a personal, business is doing things. So I appreciate you joining. I appreciate the music that Steve plays at the end of the show to make me dance a little bit. I got my leather jacket on. I'm feeling fierce. So we're in a good place. So Melina, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate you and everything you're doing for our industry. It's really important. So thank you.
Thank you, Will. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, so nice. So you guys, if you don't have Will's book, his book's Marketing to Mindstate. It's a great book. So when I read it, I was going, yes, because before that, it was a one-size-fits-all message. But what Will's book really helps you understand is how to dial in and connect deeper with the folks, because we're not all in the same state of mind all day long. We're in different states of mind. And so that was the big epiphany for me. So you can learn more about Will at theMindstateGroup.com. Get his book. If you don't have his book, then you're missing out. And be sure to get Melina's book as well. And I guess while you're at it, get my book too.
Yeah, you got a book.
Okay. My book's The Golden Toilet.
I don't even have it out for you. I wish I would have had it out for you. It's over here somewhere.
Right. So stop flushing your marketing budget into your website and build a system that grows your business. And so here we go. We got a little outro. That's right. Did you know that Marketing Mind States is a podcast now? Be sure to subscribe, like. We appreciate all your input on this. And we're on YouTube. You can catch Will, see these replays on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe there. And we're out.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you.